the music was going really well. We were made, I mean, the first thing we made Sempiternal basically in
Right.
those first 2-3 months with, pretty much. But then it was the weird thing I remember is because I didn't know much about the band, you know what I mean? Because
Hmm.
I was into new metal when I was like 15, 16, up to maybe when I was like 17, 18. And then I kind of went to live in London and I was like into electronic music. And I
Right.
had I kind of had I still listen to it in a kind of, this is the shit I grew up listening to kind of
But
way.
you're
But
not like a scene kid,
I wasn't, no, I wasn't keeping up with like the next generation of
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So Bring Me kind of fell just after that. I knew the name, but it was not. I was not buying Kerrang when I was 18, 19. You know what I
Right.
mean? I'd moved on from that kind of thing. In my head, you know what I mean? Obviously not. But so yeah, I knew the band, but I didn't realize, I didn't really know their back catalogue that well, if I'm honest. Um, so
That's
uh,
probably a good thing, I would imagine, for this kind of role because, you guys are not a band that stays in one place.
well, I mean, that was the main thing I kind of was surprised by, was that there was pretty much zero regard for anything that had been before whatsoever. I mean, I was probably the person, and I'm not, at this point, I wasn't even in the band. And I would say I was the person who was most concerned about what we were making. You know what I mean? Because I was kind of like,
Yeah.
this, it seems like your fans are going to really dislike this music.
Right.
But he was just like, I don't care, basically. That was the general vibe. And to be fair, all the other guys were the same. Everyone was like, well, we like it, so fuck them. So I was like, okay, well, we'll just go with it. And then we made a load of music without really any vocals, which I think was a weird part of the process as well. We kind
Hmm.
of made a bunch of instrumentals without particularly thinking about what the vocals were going to do. And then we started to chip away. We started to try and do vocals, and that was the kind of, I would say, the real point where it was like, because Ollie was screaming, we were trying screaming, and he was like, oh, it feels like a disappointment for the song, I think, I guess,
Right.
to just have screener, like on some of them songs, like Can You Feel My Heart? It's a very melodic song. And he was like, I really want to sing. And he couldn't sing. He'd never sung before. He was
Right.
tone deaf, to be honest. I mean, I have said this before. He said it, but it's actually true. He really couldn't sing at all. He never tried. And I think because I'd worked in like recording studios as well, and I'd run my own studio for quite a few years, so I had quite a lot of experience in working with people who couldn't
Hmm.
sing. Actually, like a lot of local bands would come through, and
Yeah.
they're doing like a day or two session, and they want something that sounds good.
Yeah.
So I had kind of my own learned experience of how to coach
And
a
that's a
performance.
whole thing because, with vocalists, it's so much about being in the right place psychologically and feeling confident and good. It's like coaching a vocalist as a producer is almost being like their psychologist.
A little bit. It's a combination. It's like psychologist, but it's also being confident enough to keep to. For me, it's a lot of A being. So I'm singing at them
Mm-hmm.
until they give me what I think it should be or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it's tricks as well. Like knowing all the things you can do to make, how you can layer
Mm-hmm.
things to make them sound good, how you can tune things, how you can edit between.
Right.
So at the beginning, it was, to be fair, it was quite edit heavy because Ollie wanted it to sound really good, but he knew he was reaching a little bit beyond what he could do. But obviously, since then, it's just a whole different. He's just
Yeah.
gradually improved and improved and improved to a point where I feel like it's own. You could write a study on that because I don't
Mm-hmm.
think it's probably been done that much actually. I just wouldn't have believed that you could go from borderline tone deaf to being able to, headline a
Yeah.
festival, actually
Yeah.
sing.
Ollie's a great vocalist now.
It's
I mean, he
incredible.
was always a great vocalist, but in a different way.
Exactly. Yeah. He's always been a great lyricist,
Yeah.
performer, screamer, but the some of the heights he's achieved with his singing is just, I still blows my mind, to be honest, because I doubted that at the beginning. I just thought we could get it to sound half decent, but I didn't think he'd ever be able to really stand on a stage and sing it properly.
Right.
That's just pure grind and determination, I would say. Um,
Well, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I was just trying to think where I was because I've gone off on a bit of a tangent. But yeah, anyway, I mean, around that time, that was that process of that was my first introduction to the band was writing that music, and then us realizing, okay, we're going to have some melodic singing, and the process of Ollie starting to find his voice, I guess.
How do you look back on Sempiternal now? Because I consider that to be really kind of the defining album of that era of metalcore. You obviously had a lot of input on it. And I think the more time goes on, the more people regard it as like a real classic. How do you feel about it looking back on it now?
I mean, I do think it's good. It's, I guess it is really, but to me, because I just naturally think of all the things that influenced it. So it doesn't feel as much like a classic to me because
Right.
I know where it's been stolen from in a way.
Of course.
I think that's the kind of
that's
thing.
that's every album.
That's every album, and even classic albums, they've all been
Yeah.
inspired by other classic albums. I often think of like White Pony, and for me, White Pony by Deftones was like a real seminal. That's their classic album. That was like
Yeah.
my favorite album when I was younger, and I think that's just a standalone masterpiece. But I think, well, there's obviously all kinds of influences and things that they were listening to, but they've taken. Oh, I like this riff. We should just like this or whatever. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I do think. I mean, there was definitely a lot of bands that sounded like it after it came out.
Mm-hmm. Still are.
Yeah, but yeah, it's not a perfect record in terms of it's not a perfect record in any sense of the word. You know what I mean? So I guess that's part of its charm and its character.
What would you say is not perfect about it? Because to me, it sounds very polished.
It's just there's just odd things on there. It's just to me, it's there's just some odd decisions, but I guess that's what makes it interesting, really. You know,
Are you talking little things like, oh, we did this double here, or like that?
No, just like some of the songs when you get into the deeper cuts on the album, they just go off on sort of tangents that is not somewhere I would naturally go with a song now. But I guess at the time we were, you know, everyone was like, "Fuck it, this sounds cool." So, and it's hard to get that back because it's almost like I think as you move on in your career, you sort of like refine and refine and refine, and it's sometimes you've got to actually work to inject some of that looseness back in, so you're not just you can box yourself into like the perfect song, and it starts to become
right, and it gets boring.
Can start to get boring. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's very hard to get that feeling back of sort of. Not to say that you guys were stumbling around back then, but
that is how it felt a little bit. Yeah, it was just like a bit of like it kind of had the feeling of like, well, there was no bar. It was just let's just do the best we can.
And whereas you're new to the team.
I wasn't in the band, so for me, it's like I don't care anyway.
Right?
Do you know what I mean? I want to make it cool, but like there's no pressure.
Album, not mine.
There's no pressure on me at all. So. Yeah, I didn't really feel anything. I was into it. I was like, oh, you know, halfway through, I was like, this is cool. But I think it was one of those things where Ollie saw it before me, which is often the way, to be fair. He was like, this is going to be really big. And I was like, okay, cool. You know, like I was proud of it. I was like, these are cool tunes. And there's definitely, and as it went on, I was more and more like, okay, it's good. But yeah, he really knew that it was going to be good. And I think he felt like if it's really strong, then it doesn't matter if it's a complete change of vibe for the band because the strength of it will just carry it beyond anything they've done before.
Which has been the case for the band since the very beginning. I mean, I've talked about this in a million videos. You guys keep taking these crazy risks that everybody thinks are insane at first, and then they realize actually this is fucking cool, and they come around. And so that's kind of his vision of just being willing to put your balls out on the table. Yeah,
but I mean, I feel like an exhausted passenger in that process because I'm like, I'm like a nervous, anxious person. So like every time I'm like, oh, can't, I'm just like happy with we've got a good song here, and he's like, no, we need to do something. He'll like come in with some crazy idea,
right?
Like, oh, here we go again. Like I just want to do something normal, but
right.
But like really, I'd say he's the person who is always pushing for something. And if a song's just like a song, it's very rare that it's enough for him. He just wants to keep pushing to find something different or especially lyrically. He's like he'll dig around. I'm fine with like generic. I'm not a lyrics guy particularly.
Yeah.
I'm just like if the lyrics sounds nice to me, I'm like I love that line. Whereas he's always looking for real. It has to mean something to him, and it's got to be clever. And he likes the wordplay, and he'll spend hours working on a line. So he's just really, really dedicated to everything being better than what we've done before in some way. So obviously, with our band, everything's like we change a lot, so not everything is going to appeal to everyone, but
Sure.
we're always trying to do what we do as well as we can. So if we're gonna do a project where we're gonna do a certain type of genre or try and do a certain style of music, he wants it to be the best song ever made in that genre. That's the level, and it's just like it's. I'm just like okay, I'll try. I'll try to do my
Well,
best to assist in